"I can fix this. I can fix this," said the poor boy to the millionaire professor, in front of an entire team without answers. Everyone laughed until he showed his notebook filled with scribbled notes and saved the billion-dollar project from bankruptcy. The boy became a target of jealousy, false accusations, and they tried to forcibly remove him from the only chance he had in life. But in the end, it was he who unmasked everything and proved that genius has no address or last name. Shot. This story interested you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The silence was suffocating in the conference room of Aerotech America. Robert Mitchell, CEO and chief engineer of the company, ran his hands through his graying hair while observing the discouraged expressions of his team. On the monitors around them, graphs and simulations showed the same catastrophic result. The flight control system of the AT-720 prototype, the company's most promising aircraft, completely failed under severe turbulence. 2 days. "We have just 2 days until the Federal Aviation Administration audit," Robert declared, his voice carrying the weight of the situation. "If we don't solve this problem, we'll lose not only the contract with Venezuela, but also the agreements with Chile and Argentina." Charles Morgan, a systems engineer with 15 years at the company, shook his head negatively. "We've reviewed the core code 8 times. We've tested all known alternatives. Maybe we need more time. Request a postponement of the audit." "That's not an option," replied Robert, adjusting his thin-framed glasses. "Investors are breathing down our necks after last quarter's delay. There are 3,000 jobs at stake, not counting the suppliers who depend on us." Aerotech America wasn't a giant like Boeing, but it had carved out its place in the Latin American market by developing efficient, affordable, medium-sized aircraft for regional routes. The AT-720 represented a technological leap with advanced navigation systems and unprecedented fuel economy. 7 years of research and development were about to crumble because of an apparently unsolvable technical failure. The discussion continued for 2 more hours, with proposals being quickly discarded due to inconsistencies or high risks. The ETU tension was palpable when Robert ended the meeting, ordering everyone to rest for a few hours before resuming work. In the nearly empty company parking lot, Robert was walking toward his car when he noticed a small figure near the security gate. A skinny boy, no more than 9 years old, was observing the illuminated hangar where the AT-720 prototype was being tested. He wore simple clothes, carried a worn backpack, and curiously, held a notebook whose pages seemed about to fall out. "Hey, kid, it's late. What are you doing here alone?" Robert approached, concerned. The boy turned, revealing deeply intelligent eyes in a face marked by experiences too difficult for his age. "Sorry, sir. I just wanted to see the planes." "How did you get in here? This is a restricted area." "The fence has a small hole near that tree," he replied with surprising honesty. "I come almost every day after school. I like to draw the planes and imagine how they work inside." Robert should have called security, but something about that boy sparked his curiosity. "What's your name?" "Michael, sir. Michael Oliver." "And where are your parents, Michael?" The boy lowered his gaze. "I don't have parents. I live at Hope Haven, 3 blocks from here." Robert felt a tightness in his chest. The loss of his wife and daughter in an accident 5 years ago was still an open wound. "And that notebook? Are those your drawings?" Michael hesitated before handing the notebook to the engineer. Robert flipped through the pages and his eyes gradually widened. These weren't simple, childish drawings. They were detailed, technical. Diagrams, complex calculations, and precise notes on aerodynamics, navigation systems, and flight control. Some pages contained equations that seemed to have been copied from advanced engineering books. "Where did you learn all this?" asked Robert, genuinely astonished. "From books I find in the trash behind the university. I also watched documentaries when they let me use the computer at the shelter," Michael explained with simplicity. "Yesterday I saw the AT-720 tests. The plane shook a lot when they turned on the big fans." "You observed the turbulence simulation tests?" Robert was increasingly impressed with the boy's insight. "Yes, And I think I know why the plane gets confused when it shakes a lot. Robert almost laughed at the expression confused plane, but contained himself. And why do you think that happens, Michael? It's like when three people say different things at the same time. You don't know who to believe, explained Michael, pointing to a page in his notebook where he had drawn a rudimentary but surprisingly accurate diagram of the aircraft's sensor system. The sensors fight each other during turbulence, and the computer doesn't know which one is right. Robert felt a shiver run down his spine. The boy had identified exactly the problem that his team of experienced engineers had been trying to solve for weeks. Do you have any idea how to solve this, Michael? The boy nodded seriously. It's simple. They need to vote. Vote? Yes. When three sensors say different things, the computer accepts what the majority says and ignores the odd one out. And if it's still confused, it should ask the pilot, because people are smarter than machines when something doesn't make sense. Robert was momentarily speechless. What Michael was describing in childish language was a sophisticated redundancy system based on voting, discarding outliers, temporal signal dampening, and prioritization of manual command in critical situations, exactly the type of solution that could work. Michael, would you like to come in and show me more of your ideas? The boy's eyes lit up. Can I see the plane up close? You can. And maybe if your idea works, you'll help me save my company. As they walked to the hangar, Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. That unlikely encounter could not only save Aerotech America, but also forever change the destiny of that extraordinary boy, and perhaps his own. In the Poisart's simulation laboratory, Michael explained his concept in greater detail, using colored pencils to identify the different sensors and how they should interact. The simplicity and elegance of the solution left the few engineers present astonished. After 3 hours of adaptations and preliminary tests, the system showed promising results. We need to implement this in the prototype immediately and conduct full tests in the morning, ordered Robert, with renewed energy. Then he looked at Michael, who was struggling to keep his eyes open. As for you, young genius, you need rest. I'll take you back to the shelter, and tomorrow we'll talk more. On the way to the shelter, Robert couldn't stop thinking about the circumstances that had brought this extraordinary boy into his life at the most critical moment. As he watched Michael sleeping in the passenger seat, an idea began to form in his mind. An idea that could fill the void in his heart and give Michael the opportunities he deserved. The next morning, the atmosphere at Aerotech America was completely different. Engineers and technicians moved with renewed energy as the first tests of the modified system showed surprising results. The AT-720, now equipped with the solution proposed by Michael, remained stable even in the most adverse simulated turbulence conditions. Robert observed everything with a mixture of relief and admiration. At his side, Michael contemplated the monitors with wide eyes, fascinated by the impact of his ideas. "It actually worked," whispered the boy, as if fearing to break the spell of the moment. "Yes, it worked," confirmed Robert, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You saved my company, Michael." Charles Morgan approached, still incredulous at the results. "The FAA auditors will be impressed. The system is performing beyond the required specifications." While the team celebrated, Robert took Michael to his office. The elegant environment, with a panoramic view of the test runway, initially intimidated the boy. "Michael, I want to talk about your future," began Robert, indicating a comfortable armchair. "I spoke with the director of Hope Haven this morning. She told me your story." The boy lowered his gaze, suddenly uncomfortable. "I know you lost your parents in an accident when you were only 4 years old, and that since then you've been through 3 foster families who returned you to the system." Robert spoke gently, aware of the pain behind that story. "The director said you were always considered difficult to adapt because of your obsessive interest in planes and technical books instead of common toys. People don't like it when I ask too many questions or when I take things apart to see how they work," murmured Michael. Robert smiled, recognizing himself in those words. You know, I was like that as a child too. My parents nearly went crazy when I dismantled the new TV to understand why the picture appeared. That revelation drew a shy smile from Michael. I have a proposal for you, continued Robert. I'd like you to come live with me initially as your legal guardian. If we adapt well to each other, we could consider formal adoption later on. Michael's eyes widened. Live in your house? Really? Yes. I have a big, empty house since... Robert hesitated. The old pain briefly surfacing. Since I lost my family 5 years ago. It would be good to have company again, especially someone who shares my passion for aeronautical engineering. But why me? There are easier children at the shelter, questioned Michael with the disconcerting honesty, typical of his age. Robert leaned forward, looking directly into the boy's eyes. Because you're special, Michael. Not just for what you did yesterday, but for the potential I see in you. I believe talent like yours deserves the best education and opportunities I can offer. The temporary guardianship process was initiated that same day with the enthusiastic support of the shelter director, who had always believed in Michael's extraordinary potential. In a week after the successful FAA audit that guaranteed the certification of the AT-720, the boy moved into Robert's spacious residence in Brookhaven, Atlanta. The first days were of mutual adaptation. Robert, accustomed to the solitude of recent years, had to relearn the routines of caring for another person. Michael, in turn, seemed not to believe the luck he had. His room, decorated with airplane models and a shelf full of technical books, was a dream come true. "Is all this really for me?" he asked on the first night, running his fingers along the spines of books on aerospace engineering, physics, and mathematics. "Of course, but remember that you'll also need to study other subjects in school: history, English, geography." "I like all subjects," assured Michael. "It's just that planes are more interesting." Robert smiled. "Tomorrow you'll meet your new school. It's one of the best in the city with excellent laboratories. I'm sure you'll love it." Brookhaven International School was indeed an elite institution, attended by the children of Atlanta's high society. Robert had used his influence to secure a place for Michael, convincing the administration about the boy's extraordinary abilities. However, neither he nor Michael were prepared for the social challenges they would face in that environment. On the very first day, the differences became evident. While other students arrived in luxury cars, wearing impeccable uniforms and carrying the latest electronic devices, Michael felt out of place with his new but simple clothes and his unbranded backpack. During recess, a group of boys approached, led by Peter Adams, son of an important real estate businessman. "So you're the genius the engineer found in the trash," taunted Peter, provoking laughter from his colleagues. "My dad said Mitchell is going crazy after losing his family, adopting anyone who shows up." Michael was paralyzed, unable to respond to that gratuitous cruelty. A passing teacher quickly intervened, dispersing the group, but the damage was done. That afternoon, when Robert picked him up, he immediately noticed something was wrong. "What happened, Michael? Didn't you like the school?" "The school is amazing," replied the boy, forcing a smile. "The laboratories are much better than the torn books I used to find." Robert knew there was more. "And the classmates, did you make friends?" Michael looked out the car window, avoiding eye contact. "They're different from me." That's simple. Response contained a whole universe of rejection that Robert knew well. He too had faced prejudice in his youth when he entered university as a scholarship student coming from a humble family from the countryside. "You know, Michael, extraordinary people often face difficulties fitting in. It's not your fault if others can't understand your value." "What if I never fit in? Then we'll create our own space in the world," replied Robert with conviction, "and you'll find people who value you exactly as you are." In the following weeks, a deep bond began to form between the two. Robert rearranged his schedules at the company to be more present in Michael's life, helping him with school assignments and creating small scientific projects to develop together on weekends. In the basement of the house, they set up an improvised laboratory where they built scale models of historical aircraft, discussing principles of aerodynamics and flight mechanics. For Michael, that exclusive attention and genuine respect for his ideas were completely new experiences. For the first time, he felt truly valued and understood. For Robert, the opportunity to share his knowledge and witness the flourishing of that brilliant mind brought back the purpose he had lost with the family tragedy. At Aerotech America, the success of the AT-720 brought a wave of new contracts and international recognition. The revolutionary flight control system, now patented as the Adaptive Redundancy System, was being implemented across the company's fleet. Robert made sure to register Michael as co-creator of the technology, establishing a trust fund with the royalties to guarantee his educational future. However, not everyone viewed that unusual partnership favorably. Richard Vasquez, Vice President of Operations and a company veteran, observed with growing discomfort the attention the boy was receiving. After 2 decades dedicated to Aerotech America, he suddenly found himself overshadowed by a 9-year-old boy whose simple ideas had solved problems that his team couldn't. "This can't continue like this," he commented to Charles Morgan during a board meeting. "Robert is putting the company's reputation at risk by giving so much credit to a child. Who's going to believe that serious technology can come from a shelter kid?" "The results speak for themselves," replied Charles, uncomfortable with the tone of the conversation. "The system works perfectly. For now," retorted Richard, a calculating gleam in his eyes. "But what will happen when the first problem arises? Do you think our clients will be comfortable knowing they depend on childish ideas?" The seed of distrust was planted. Richard began to act discreetly, collecting information about Michael's past, investigating his interactions at school, and closely monitoring his influence on Robert. A storm was forming on the horizon, threatening the fragile happiness that Michael and Robert had built. Meanwhile, oblivious to these machinations, tutor and pupil strengthened their bonds day by day. On the eve of Michael's 10th birthday, Robert surprised him with a special visit to Aerotech America's professional simulator, where he could pilot the AT-720 in an immersive experience. Michael's 10th birthday was celebrated with a small party at Robert's house. For the first time in his life, the boy blew out candles on a cake made especially for him, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about his well-being. The technical team at Aerotech America had grown fond of the boy, impressed not only by his extraordinary intelligence, but also by his humility and contagious enthusiasm. "Make a wish before blowing out the candles," suggested Robert, smiling at seeing the boy's marveled expression in front of the cake, decorated with miniature airplanes. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, concentrating. When he opened them again, there was a gleam of determination. "Done. I wish to stay with you forever." An emotional silence took over the room. Robert felt a lump in his throat. "Well, regarding that, I have a surprise for you." He handed Michael an envelope. Inside were official documents. The adoption process had been formally initiated. "Does this mean—" Michael couldn't finish the sentence, his voice choked with emotion. "It means that, if everything goes well with the legal process, in a few months you'll officially be Michael Mitchell," confirmed Robert, his voice also trembling. "If that's what you wish, of course." The answer came in the form of a tight hug. No words could better express that moment. While the small celebration continued, no one noticed Richard Vasquez discreetly observing from the door, his face a mask of cordiality that barely disguised the growing resentment. After briefly congratulating the birthday boy, he withdrew to his office where a private investigator was waiting. "What did you find out about the boy's past?" he asked, carefully closing the door. The woman opened a folder with documents. "Michael, Oliver, 10 years old, orphaned since age 4 after an accident with his parents, went through 3 adoption attempts, all failed. Reports from the adoptive families mention difficult and obsessive behavior. Details about these returns? The first family returned him after 6 months because he completely dismantled the house's electrical system, causing a short circuit. The second lasted only 3 months. The boy had school adaptation problems, refusing to participate in group activities and constantly correcting teachers. The third family gave up when he ran away from home to visit the Aerospace Museum, causing a police alert. Richard smiled, satisfied. Perfect. And about the current school? He's clearly socially isolated. Classmates consider him strange and arrogant. There have been 3 incidents recorded by the Coordination for Inappropriate Responses to Provocations. Copy those records for me, ordered Richard, and continue monitoring the situation at school. I want to know about any new incidents. The following week, Robert was surprised by an urgent summons to appear at Michael's school. In the principal's office, he found the boy downcast, with a bandage on his eyebrow. "What happened?" asked Robert, alarmed. The principal, Dr. Margaret Campbell, adjusted her glasses with a severe expression. "There was an incident in the science laboratory. Michael responded aggressively to a provocation, resulting in a physical altercation with another student." "It wasn't quite like that," interrupted Michael in a low voice. "Peter and his friends hid my project notebook in the chemical waste bin. When I protested, he said it was the appropriate place for the ideas of a trash boy." Robert felt his blood boil. "And the other boy? Is he also being punished for the provocation?" The principal hesitated. "We don't have evidence of the initial provocation, only witnesses to the confrontation. Peter Adams categorically denies having made any offensive comments." Peter Adams, son of Gregory Adams from Adams Development Group? Robert was beginning to understand the situation. Convenient that nobody heard the provocation, isn't it? "Mr. Mitchell, I understand your frustration, but we need to maintain objectivity." Michael reacted disproportionately, threatening Peter with technical language about how to use laboratory chemicals to create unpleasant reactions. Robert looked at Michael, surprised. "He said he was going to throw my notebook in the acid." "I just explained that the combination would create toxic smoke and could be dangerous," murmured the boy. The principal sighed deeply. Regardless of intentions, such behavior cannot be tolerated. Michael is suspended for 3 days. I strongly recommend that you use this time to reflect on appropriate conduct in a school environment. On the way home, silence prevailed in the car. Finally, Robert broke the tension. "Michael, I know it's being difficult, but we need to find better ways to handle these situations." "I tried to ignore it like you advised," replied the boy, his trembling voice containing held-back tears. "But they don't stop. They say you only adopted me because you need my ideas for the company, that when I grow up you'll discard me like the other families did." Robert abruptly parked the car and turned to face Michael. "That's absolutely false. You're much more than your ideas to me, Michael. You've become the son I lost." It was the first time Robert had verbalized that feeling. Michael finally raised his gaze, his eyes meeting the engineer's. In that silent moment, a deep understanding passed between them, further strengthening the bond they had built. Meanwhile, at Aerotech America, Michael's school suspension was rapidly becoming the preferred topic in the corridors, thanks to the discreet distribution of information by Richard. The veteran executive had carefully constructed a narrative that questioned the boy's emotional stability and, by extension, Robert's sensibility in involving him in sensitive technical projects. 2 weeks after the school incident, Robert was summoned for an emergency meeting with the company's legal department. Upon entering the room, he found a tense atmosphere and official documents on the table. "What's happening?" he asked, immediately realizing that something serious had occurred. Claire Fisher, Aerotech America's chief counsel, nervously adjusted her papers. "We received a notification from Child Protective Services. There's a formal complaint alleging intellectual exploitation of a minor under your guardianship." "What? That's absurd." "The complaint specifically alleges that you're using Michael to solve the company's technical problems, subjecting him to pressure incompatible with his age and psychological development." Robert was stunned. Who would make such an unfounded accusation? Michael has never been pressured into anything. His contributions were spontaneous, and I've always respected his limits. "The complaint is anonymous, but quite detailed," continued Claire. "It specifically mentions the adaptive redundancy system. the joint patent registration, and the royalty fund, suggesting that you're commercializing the intellectual capacity of a vulnerable minor. The door to the room opened and Richard entered, feigning surprise at seeing Robert. "Oh, are you already discussing the situation? I deeply regret this, Robert. I just received calls from 2 journalists asking for the company's official position on the case." Journalists? How did this leak to the press so quickly? Robert was increasingly confused. "These are modern times. Sensitive information rarely remains confidential," replied Richard with false compassion. "We need a strategy to minimize damage to the company's reputation." Robert stood up, furious. "Minimize damage? We're talking about a boy's life, my family." "Precisely why we suggest that you temporarily step away from technical direction until this situation is clarified," intervened Richard, "for your own protection and Michael's." "Is this a coup, Richard? Is this how you plan to take my position after all these years?" Richard pretended to be offended. "I'm just thinking about what's best for everyone involved, especially for the boy. After all, 3 families have already returned him. Perhaps there are reasons for that which you haven't yet discovered." Robert felt the blood freeze in his veins. "How do you know about the previous adoption attempts? Those records are confidential." The question caught Richard off guard. Before he could elaborate a convincing answer, the lawyer intervened. "Let's focus on the immediate problem. Child Protective Services investigators have requested a visit to your residence tomorrow to assess the conditions in which Michael lives." "Great. I have nothing to hide," affirmed Robert, regaining his composure. "Michael has a loving home, attends an excellent school, and has all his needs met. Anyone with the slightest common sense will see that." When he arrived home, Robert found Michael in his room, working on a school project about renewable energy. He didn't have the courage to tell him about the complaint, preferring to protect him from that anguish for at least one more night. The next morning, 2 social workers and a psychologist arrived punctually. The inspection was thorough and disconcerting. Every aspect of the house was photographed and documented, invasive questions were asked, and Michael was interviewed separately for almost 2 hours. When they finally left, Robert found the boy sitting on the stairs with a disturbed expression. "They asked if you forced me to work on projects for the company," said Michael, his voice trembling with indignation. "They wanted to know if you get angry when I don't have good ideas, or if you threaten to return me to the shelter when I can't solve problems." Robert sat beside him, feeling a crushing weight in his chest. "Michael, I need you to know something very important. Regardless of what happens, I will never abandon you. I promise." The boy nodded, but his eyes revealed a shadow of doubt. After 3 previous abandonments, insecurity was deeply rooted. Robert realized with sadness that this investigation had reopened emotional wounds that were just beginning to heal. That night, while Michael was finally asleep, Robert received a call from the family lawyer he had hired to assist with the adoption process. "We have a serious problem," informed the lawyer. "The preliminary report suggests that the home environment may be excessively stimulating and atypically focused on intellectual performance. There's a recommendation for temporary suspension of guardianship while more in-depth investigations are conducted." Robert felt the world crumble beneath his feet. They want to take Michael away from me. Based on what? On concerns about possible intellectual exploitation and inappropriate pressure. The report specifically mentions the improvised laboratory in the basement and the technical projects you develop together as evidence of an environment that prioritizes productivity over balanced emotional development. That's ridiculous. Those projects are his joy, the way we connect. I know, Robert, but we need to be strategic. I strongly suggest that you temporarily dismantle the basement laboratory and emphasize activities more conventionally associated with childhood. Parks, games, sports, things that social workers consider normal. After hanging up, Robert remained motionless in the darkened room, devastated by the cruel irony of the situation. The very qualities that made Michael special, his insatiable curiosity, his brilliant mind, his interest in intellectual challenges, were being used against him, transformed into evidence of a supposedly inappropriate environment. Morning arrived. Grey and cold, reflecting the mood that dominated the house. Robert had spent the night reorganizing the environment according to the lawyer's recommendations. The basement laboratory, once a sanctuary of creativity and learning, was now transformed into a conventional game room. The technical books were discreetly stored away, replaced by children's literature and educational games considered appropriate for Michael's age. When the boy came down for breakfast, he immediately noticed the tension on Robert's face. Something happened, didn't it? Asked Michael, with the sharp perception that had always characterized him. Is it because of those people who came yesterday? Robert hesitated, seeking words that could soften the situation without lying. Yes, Michael. We're facing some legal challenges. There are people who don't understand our relationship and are questioning whether this is the ideal environment for you. The boy's eyes widened in panic. Are they going to take me away? Will I have to go back to the shelter? Not if it depends on me, replied Robert firmly, kneeling to be at the same level as the boy. We're taking all necessary measures to ensure that you remain here where you belong, but we need to be cautious for a while. Is that why the laboratory is different? Michael had noticed the changes as soon as he passed by the half-open basement door. Yes, temporarily, we need to demonstrate that we have varied activities, not just technical projects. Michael nodded slowly, processing the information. I can pretend to like soccer and normal video games if that helps. Robert felt a pang in his heart. It shouldn't be necessary to pretend to be someone else to be accepted, Michael. But people always expect me to be different. From who I am, replied the boy with a painful wisdom beyond his years. At school, at the shelter, everywhere. Before Robert could respond, the phone rang. It was Charles Morgan, with urgent news from Aerotech America. Robert, we have a critical problem with the AT-720. During the long-distance test flight, the positioning system showed significant divergences at high speeds. The pilot managed to return safely, but our schedule is compromised. The presentation for international buyers is the day after tomorrow. I'll be there in an hour, replied Robert, hanging up with concern. Michael, who had overheard the conversation, seemed thoughtful. Can I go with you? I promise not to do anything that looks like work. Robert hesitated. I don't know if it's prudent, considering the current situation. If the investigators find out, I took you to the company. Please, insisted Michael. Staying alone here will only make me think bad thoughts. Reluctantly, Robert agreed. At Aerotech America, he kept Michael in the break room, away from the technical areas, while he met with the team to analyze the problem. After hours of discussion, the conclusion was disheartening. The positioning system had a critical desynchronization between sensors in specific altitude and speed conditions, something that hadn't been detected in the initial simulations. During a break, Robert found Michael leafing through an aviation magazine in the break room. How are things going? Asked the boy, noticing the engineer's downcast expression. Complicated. We have a significant technical problem and little time to solve it. Michael bit his lip, clearly wanting to help, but aware of the restrictions imposed by the situation. Can you tell me what the problem is, just out of curiosity, not to work on it? Robert smiled sadly. It's a desynchronization problem in the positioning sensors at high speeds, something we couldn't replicate in the simulations. Michael's eyes lit up with genuine interest. Do you have the flight records, the sensor logs? Yes, we're analyzing them now. Can I take a look, just for fun? Robert knew he should refuse, considering the accusations they faced. However, the boy's authentic curiosity and the gravity of the company's situation made him yield. Just a quick look. As a mental exercise, it's not work, it's learning. In Robert's office, Michael carefully examined the system logs. After 20 minutes of concentrated silence, he pointed to a specific sequence. Here, the sensors are receiving information at slightly different times. When the plane is slow, it doesn't matter much, but when it's very fast, even milliseconds make a difference. Robert observed the indicated pattern, impressed. You're right. It's a latency problem in data transmission. You need a reconciliation algorithm, suggested Michael, enthusiastic about the intellectual challenge. something that adjusts the times so that all sensors are talking about the exact same moment, not similar moments. That simple observation was precisely what the technical team needed. Robert carefully documented the idea as an educational discussion, not as work, and took the concept to the team. In a few hours, a reconciliation algorithm was developed and implemented, solving the problem in time for the presentation to international buyers. When they returned home that night, Robert felt simultaneously relieved by the solved problem and apprehensive about the legal situation. Michael, in turn, was visibly proud to have contributed, even if informally. "See, I can help without it looking like work," commented the boy as they ate dinner. "It's just fun for me, like puzzles." Robert smiled, admiring the boy's resilience and optimism. "You are truly extraordinary, Michael, and I promise we'll overcome these obstacles together." The sound of the doorbell interrupted the moment. When Robert opened the door, he faced two social workers and a police officer. "Mr. Mitchell, we have a court order for the temporary removal of the minor Michael Oliver to an institutional shelter, while investigations continue," announced the social worker, handing over an official document. Robert felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "You can't do this. Michael is perfectly fine here. We have a recent medical report recommending rest because of a fever he had yesterday." "I'm sorry, but the order is clear," insisted the woman. "There are serious concerns about possible intellectual exploitation and an inappropriate environment." Michael appeared in the hallway, pale and trembling. "Robert, what's happening?" "Nothing is going to happen," replied Robert firmly. "Nobody is going to take you away. We'll resolve this legally." The police officer stepped forward. "Sir, please, don't make it difficult to comply with the court order. It would only harm your situation." At that critical moment, Robert's phone rang. It was Charles Morgan in a state of alert. "Robert, you need to see this immediately. I just received an anonymous email with compromising documents. I'm sending them to your tablet now." Robert quickly opened the attachment received, and his eyes widened. They were emails, bank transfers, and detailed instructions linking Richard Vasquez to an elaborate conspiracy to sabotage his relationship with Michael. The executive had hired private investigators, bribed school staff to socially isolate Michael, and most seriously, falsified reports to Child Protective Services. "I need you to see this," Robert handed the tablet to the officials present. "These are evidences that the accusations against me were fabricated as part of a corporate conspiracy." The social workers and the police officer examined the documents with growing astonishment. The evidence was compelling and impossible to ignore. "Where did these documents come from?" asked the police officer, clearly disturbed by the content. "It was Michael who answered, stepping forward. "I found them on the company servers. Mr. Vasquez didn't know I had authorized access to the system as part of the educational program Robert created for me. When I started noticing strange things happening, I decided to investigate." Robert looked at the boy, surprised. "You knew about all this. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed concrete evidence," explained Michael. "I learned from you that serious accusations require solid evidence." The lead social worker sighed deeply. "This completely changes the picture. We need to suspend the removal order until this new information is properly evaluated." In the days that followed, the story gained media proportions. The press, previously fed with distorted information about possible exploitation, now focused on the corporate conspiracy unmasked by a 10-year-old boy. Richard Vasquez was removed from Aerotech America while internal and police investigations continued. 2 weeks after the incident, a special hearing was convened to discuss the case. Educational authorities, child development specialists, child protective services representatives and children's rights advocates gathered to debate the boundaries between encouraging talent and possible exploitation. Robert was invited to present his perspective. "Protecting a child doesn't mean preventing them from exploring their natural talents," he stated with conviction. "It means ensuring that this occurs in an environment of safety, affection, and freedom." Michael isn't forced into anything. His exceptional mind is an integral part of who he is, and suppressing that would be the true form of abuse. When it was Michael's turn to speak, the room fell into absolute silence. The boy, with surprising maturity, explained his view. Exploitation is when someone forces you to do things, doesn't care about how you feel, and only wants to gain from your work, he said, with touching simplicity. Care is when someone gives you freedom to create but is always nearby to protect you. Before meeting Robert, I was invisible. Now I am seen and heard. His final declaration moved everyone. My dream is that no different child is silenced or hidden out of fear. When I grow up, I want to create educational programs to help other children like me, who have special ideas but live in difficult places. The commotion was instantaneous. The case against Robert was officially archived for lack of evidence of exploitation. More importantly, the hearing resulted in a significant precedent for the treatment of gifted children in vulnerable situations, recognizing the need for personalized approaches that respected their unique abilities. 3 months later, the adoption was finally formalized. Michael Oliver officially became Michael Mitchell in a simple but emotional ceremony in family court. To celebrate, Robert announced the creation of the New Horizons Foundation, dedicated to identifying and supporting talented children in underprivileged communities, offering them educational opportunities without removing them from their cultural contexts. Aerotech America, recovered from the crisis and strengthened by the international success of the AT-720, implemented a revolutionary corporate ethics code, emphasizing practices that valued diversity of thought and the balance between technical innovation and humanism. The fundamental principle of the adaptive redundancy system created by Michael, based on voting among sensors, discarding outliers, temporal dampening, and prioritization of human command in ambiguous situations, became a metaphor for the company's new philosophy, listening to multiple perspectives, eliminating toxic influences, giving time for the natural development of ideas, and always prioritizing the human factor in critical decisions. On the night of the official adoption celebration, Robert found Michael in his room contemplating the stars through the window. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting beside his son. "About how everything changed in just 1 year," replied the boy. "Before I would look at the sky and only think about how planes managed to fly so high. Now, I think about all the people who can travel in those planes, visit new places, reunite with those they love." Robert smiled, recognizing the transformation. Michael continued to be an engineering genius, but he had developed something equally valuable, a deep understanding of the human dimension behind technology. "You know what I learned from you, Michael?" Robert put his arm around his son's shoulders. "That the most perfect systems are those that recognize their own imperfections and constantly adapt, whether they're aircraft systems or families." Michael rested his head on his father's shoulder. "Like our sensor system, listen, filter out the noise, wait for the right time, and trust the heart when logic fails." "Exactly, and this system will never fail because we'll always be together to adjust it." As they observed the stars, father and son knew they had found much more than technical solutions or legal arrangements. They had discovered a fundamental truth, that true genius lies not only in the ability to solve complex problems, but in the courage to believe that, even in the most turbulent moments, there is always a path to stability when there is genuine love and respect. Like the very algorithm that had saved the company, their lives now functioned in perfect harmony, listening to multiple perspectives, discarding negative influences, giving time for natural development, and above all, trusting human sensitivity to guide the most important decisions. The end. Dear listeners, we hope that Robert and Michael's story has deeply touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally moving stories. Find it here on the left side. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the bonds that unite us. Don't miss our upcoming content. We're eager